A great pleasure welcoming Mlamli Booi, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Centek, and of course Centek performing such a critical role in telecommunications in the country, making sure that radio signals and television signals get all over the place. It's such a great pleasure to welcome you to What's Next, Mlamli. How are you doing?
Uh, Good day, Aki. Thank you very much for welcoming me. Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you. We're living in exciting times and interesting times, but I guess it's one of those great times to be alive today.
No, absolutely. Now, listen, I've been in broadcasting, so I know a lot about what Centek does.
Yeah.
I've been up a few of your towers, and you form such a critical part of our infrastructure across the country. And one of the things that people don't know about is the Brixton Tower, and the name that Centek sits on top of it, and how critically important that is on that Brixton Tower. Not a lot of people know that that is a critical component of just getting signal to radio to television, and how important that is, that Brixton Tower. Tell us a little bit about Centek, about the tower, and give us a brief overview of Centek, because it's such a fascinating organization.
Yeah. No, thank you. Centek is a state-owned entity, as some may know, and our mandate is really to deliver universal access to media that covers both radio and television. And we carry broadcasters such as the SABC, which is our big one on television, and then you have ETV and MultiChoice on DTT, and all the radio stations in the country are carried on our network, both community media and commercial, as well as the public broadcasting services. Some community media broadcasters may be carrying their content themselves, which are quite a few of them. But what you see in Auckland Park or in Brixton Tower, that is our biggest site in the country. And the audience that is covered by that site is in excess of 5 million users in Gauteng. So it is one of our platinum sites, which we ensure that it runs 24 hours, whether there's load shedding or not, it keeps running, because we've provisioned it for it to be carried by backup services and in terms of power supply. And Centek, as an organization, we also are focusing on providing broadband connectivity for remote sites. We know that the mobile operators and other entities who are commercial, they do all the creaming of the broadband services in the main cities, but there are outlying areas out there who are not covered by broadband services. So we fill that gap where there's a need. When government says, look, we've got a clinic out there, we've got a school out there, which can you provide a service to it? Or we've got a government department there that we would like to, as a government, would like to cover. Can you provide that service? And that is really what we do, to fill the gap which the commercial entities have not managed to do. And obviously, because we are not funded by government, we fund from a commercial activity. So it has to make sense commercially, whatever we do.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I mean, the Brixton Tower is a fascinating one. I mean, I think the Brixton Tower has been around for more than, what, 50
Yeah.
years? And I remember in the days there used to be all sorts of different technologies when there were pages around. I'm giving my age away, but it's actually at a very high point. So you've
Yeah.
got quite a long range from there, and you've got all sorts of microwave links at the top of that tower. When you look at Centek at the moment, you mentioned about all the broadcast links. And obviously, the business focus has also changed quite a bit.
Yes.
I mean, we're hearing about digital migration, for example. You've evolved together with technology, and you mentioned broadband and all the fiber links that you guys offer. But Centek's new business focus post digital migration, what is Centek going to evolve into as a business?
Yeah. We've been busy with the digital migration, as you've said, Aki, and the infrastructure has been set up, rolled out. We've got it ready. I think almost more than 10 years now that the infrastructure has been ready for delivering DTT And we're basically running two networks now: the analog network and the digital terrestrial network. So when we switch off analog in the not so far future, we will then be running on digital only, where we've got multiple channels where our broadcasters will be are carried on this network right now, and we have a situation, for instance, in towers such as Brixton, where we're running multiple channels, and my information on Brixton, I was trying to source it out, it's more than 200 meters high. So it is really the tallest site that we have in the country, in fact. If you've been up on top there, it's quite scary. You must not look down when you climb that tower, otherwise you'll feel a bit height sick. Yeah. So
Well, listen, I haven't been. I'd love to go sometime
yeah,
if the invitation is open. I find those towers fascinating.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt you.
yeah. No problem. So once we've done the migration, okay, we'll as Centek proceed with our media content distribution using digital platforms such as the digital terrestrial television and direct to home, which we're currently doing, which is via satellite. And also, in addition to that, we're evolving into providing broadband services in the remote areas, as I've said earlier on, using satellite and broadband wireless, which is terrestrial. We are yet to get the spectrum for doing our terrestrial broadband. For now, we are basically using the unlicensed spectrum for remote areas, because in those areas you don't have interference. At least you can be able to deliver broadband to the remote areas. So, but also from a technology evolution point of view, although we've been using satellite as a country and as an organization, it's always been leased satellites that we lease from providers from the US, from Europe, from the Middle East. But it's been a mandate given to us that it's about time that we now evolve from only leasing but to leasing and also owning our own satellites. So this is one of the projects which we are working on, developing a business case for them, a funding model, bringing in some of the investors which would be local and maybe some from the region. So what will Centek look like in the future? We will be an organization that has got maybe 4 components to its business model, which is one will be media, and the second one will be infrastructure, which is like managed infrastructure services such as data centers. And because we've got a lot of excess capacity on our sites, on our towers, so we lease out this capacity to users like mobile operators, and obviously they pay us for that service. And then there will be a focus on the space services, which is our satellite launch for the country. And also in addition to that, the main one will really be broadband services. So it will be those 4 components that will really be driving the business of Centek. We're still on the wholesale side of service provisioning. We are not yet on the devices and user devices. For instance, we'll set up our broadband service to a school, to a clinic, to a community, and set up Wi-Fi hotspots around. And the aim is to enable SMEs to then say, well, we've got a backhaul site here, we've got a Wi-Fi hotspot here. Can you commercialize that hotspot for the benefit of the community and also for your growth as an SME? So that's really how we're going to model our business moving forward.
It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's almost like you're reinventing what you've been doing. I mean, you've been doing broadband for a while, but you're adding on to that capacity and really providing critical services to those parts of the country, as you mentioned, that might not have broadband. You've got access to some of that spectrum. And it's interesting you talk about satellites. I know that the Pan-African Satellite is one of the major projects that Centek is currently working on. Are you able to tell us a bit about this project and the role that Centek will play in this particular satellite?
Yes. Yes, I think I can share with you briefly what has been out in the open, which the shareholder or minister Communications and Digital Technologies announced that government would like to launch a South African-owned satellite. Where we are now with that plan is we've done a lot of background work, a lot of design and specing of that satellite, a lot of coordination with our partners such as the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, Department of Science and Innovation, the Department of Trade and Industry, even defense, all the users of satellite capacity in the public sector. We've got all those partners with us developing, and we are in the process of getting a final strategy now, national strategy for communication satellite signed off by cabinet. But the mandate has been approved to go ahead with this satellite. I think the details will then go to the market in the near future, where we will then invite those potential partners, potential service providers to give us more information so that we can concretize this. The aim is to ensure that in the next 3 years, we've got an SA-owned satellite in space. And obviously, when you launch a satellite, you've got to launch it in phases. You may start by having what we call a hosted payload, meaning that you basically get a satellite provider to build a satellite for you and launch it for you and brand it for yourself. And then the second part of that is to have you build it from scratch, which is what we want to do, so that we can begin to build a capacity from a space technology perspective. We've done that in the country where we launched small low Earth orbiting satellites. So we've got a few of those that has been launched by South Africa. But now we're moving higher up in the value chain, if you like, where we're moving to an area of geostationary satellites instead of being on the low Earth orbiting satellites.
That's so interesting. And you look at how many satellites above there. I always got the impression that, satellites were, a technology that's kind of been phased out. Yet there's a lot of satellites that are being launched. Why satellite communications specifically, Mlamli?
I think it's the ease of access of every area in your geography. When you've got a satellite in space, there is no limitation. You design it for certain coverage. For instance, if we design a satellite that covers Southern Africa, so meaning that the footprint and the coverage of that coverage map of that satellite is focusing on Southern Africa, meaning that wherever you go, it doesn't matter how remote you are, you can actually access that satellite. So we can transmit information to satellite. Even if you're sitting in the most remote areas of the Eastern Cape or Limpopo, you can be able to receive that content. Now, that could be television content, which is direct to home television via satellite, or it could be broadband services which you receive using what we call VSAT, which is a very small aperture satellite service. So that's the beauty of satellite communications. When we have disasters that we face terrestrially, like we face now with the floods, where our terrestrial infrastructure is damaged, so we have to back it up with satellite communication. This is really the beauty of satellite. So if the bird doesn't fall off the sky, you always have transmission continuity. Where you need to protect is your ground station, where we have got different sites where we launch our services from, so that we can have backup. If something happens to the honeydew site, then we've got a backup site in a remote area where we can be able to back up and restore the service from.
Wow, that's so interesting. I mean, you mentioned, technology services and a backup. I mean, are there any other services that you can use through this medium? I also imagine, I don't know if the satellite will be able to do it, but, for climate change, for example, to monitor, agricultural change and weather changes and how that's impacting the environment. I mean, what other applications will we have through this satellite?
Yeah. Numerous ones. I mean, this one would be a communication satellite, and the ones that you can use for Earth observation and monitoring of climate change, disaster monitoring. would be your low Earth orbiting satellites, which you can take pictures and images of the terrain that you are monitoring. You could use those for agricultural crop monitoring, for instance. That's your low Earth orbiting satellites. For those, you need a constellation of satellites, which, in fact, even for broadband, you can use the constellation of satellites at a low Earth orbiting space, because you would not be at a geostationary location, but you need more of those to cover. When one satellite moves away from you, you need another one to continue being there so that you don't lose connectivity. So that geostationary satellite, you can use it also for not only for television, but for communications. I mean, if you remember again in your days as a broadcaster, you probably might be carrying a satellite phone to go to a remote place and be able to make telephone communications from there. That technology is still applicable even today.
Now you're giving my age away, Mlamli. Thank you for that. But absolutely, I really get where, and there is definitely a need for this particular satellite. It sounds like a very ambitious project. You did say that we have launched low orbiting satellites in the past. Do we have the expertise to be able to execute and launch a satellite of this magnitude?
Yeah. Okay, we've got a lot of expertise on the satellite in orbit monitoring via organizations such as SANSA, SA, National Space Agency, out at HDBS. We've got good capacity, good expertise from a monitoring point of view. We have never launched a geostationary satellite. So we'll still then be building that capacity, where we get our young engineers to go and be schooled on how a satellite launch happens, from the design and the manufacturing of the satellite to the launching of the satellite. So it's not about only the delivery of the satellite to space, but it's about capacity building and technology building for our own country.
Right.
It's got to be a collaborative effort, because even if we think we've got enough engineers, which we do, but the expertise for space technologies, we are still building up that expertise. And we believe with the partnership with all the other experienced satellite launchers, we will be in a position to partner with them, launch the satellite, and then build capacity to a point where we can say majority of people and resources who are on that space launch team are South African young engineers. That's what we're looking to do in the future.
Wow, this is very, very exciting. I'm going to watch this with a great deal of interest. Do you have a date in your mind when you will launch the satellite, more or less? I know that's top secret, but it won't be this year, I assume, but Q1, Q2, Q3 next year. What's the time scale that you've given yourselves?
It's still early days. We've got a very tight target. Usually to launch a satellite from beginning to launch, it takes 5 to 6 years, in some cases 7 years. But in our case, because we've got a fast track project, we're finding mechanisms to be able to meet the shareholders' target, which is to launch in 3 years' time. So we're targeting in 3 years' time to have a satellite in space, and then counting again from now, 5 years down the line, we must have a second follow-on satellite. Because you imagine you don't want to have a single satellite in space, because if there's a failure which happens, you want to have a backup satellite. So timelines are between 3 and 5 years. That's really where we're targeting.
Very, very exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to make a big difference to South Africa. Now, we talk about South Africa, but I imagine that this will also make a difference to the continent as well.
It will make a huge difference. Okay, we're a significant player on the southern African part of our continent in terms of the side of our economy, our participation in technology, and just our capability and infrastructure and so on as a country. So it will be a significant step for us, and we want to be a Pan-African player, and therefore, as a SADC country, we want to bring partners to the environment, and also share with them what we do.
And I guess this is going to foster a lot of innovation as well, get a lot of young engineers excited as well. And that for me is very, very exciting. Wishing you luck on that project, Mlamli. I'm looking forward to the launch date and you pressing the button, the countdown and the satellite gets launched. Absolutely fascinating business. Mlamli Booi, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Centek, sharing some really exciting news. I'm looking forward to that satellite launch. I think it's going to make a massive difference to our telecommunications infrastructure in the country. Look forward to that day of the launch. Thank you very, very much for joining us on What's Next, Mlamli.
Thank you very much, Aki. I look forward to that future. All the best to you.
Thank you.